And then fourth was the Flagburg, right? The Flagburg. Very, very cool.
And from that very cool deck list comes a very cool deck. Hey guys, this is Jack from Very Cool Players, and today I'll be going over my Flagburg Dragon list post set 5 of overDress. I'll be going over the stuff that I used, what kind of matchups are good and bad for the deck, and how you can counter some of your worst matchups. Before we do that, we'll have to go over some of the cards in the list. So we'll go over the ride deck first, because there actually is some things that changed in comparison to other Flagburg lists. So we'll go over the grade 0 and grade 1, since they are intertwined. Grade 0 and the grade 1 we play are for the Rorowa ride line. Sorry, you can't really see that. There we are. The Rorowa ride line, the grade 0 and the grade 1. The grade 0 is the same as another starter, but you need the grade 0 in order to use the grade 1's ability. Because the grade 1 says, when this unit is placed from riding on the grade 0 Rorowa, you can call a plant token to your back row center rearguard circle. And why that's important is for a few reasons. One, is that unlike Inroad Shooter, which calls itself from Soul, it uses a Soul. So against certain matchups, mostly Prison, it can be very bad for you because that one extra Soul can help you sometimes win a game. Secondly, because tokens don't go to Prison, you can have ways to call tokens and put those into Prison, effectively making your opponent use less, get less cards in Prison, so they have less power on their Pure Light turns. It can really help screw over your opponent's Pure Light turns. And the third reason is, once again, because of that extra soul, you can play more things like Spiritual Body Condensation without having to use the Blooming Petal Chirophilus, which is good in some instances, but also can brick you in others. So I think this ride line, for me personally, works really well. Again, there's certain ways you can build the ride deck in Flagburg. You can play obviously the original ride line, which I'm still experimenting back and forth on. I really do love it, but I'll have to do some more testing. Maybe when set 6 comes out, if the format changes, then perhaps I'll start using that ride line again. Or you can play the Zorga ride line with a bunch of orders in order to use Rank or Chain to plus your hand, which is also a pretty viable strategy. However, I think this ride line is just really good for a slower format, because we're basically still in set 4 format, with stuff like Pure Light especially, which can mess up this deck unless you play this ride line and conserve your soul. So that's for the grade 1 and the grade 0 and grade 1, sorry. Next up is the grade 2, which we play the Ascendance Assault. I did try playing the grade 2 Rorowa, which says when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, you can retire a rearguard in order to call 2 plant tokens, but against certain matchups, that wasn't the best idea for 2 reasons. One, because if your opponent retired your plant token with something like Blaster Dark, Blaster Blade, or even Shovel Stud if you went second, then you won't be able to get your 2 tokens, which can be very bad for you, and effectively you rode a vanilla that does nothing. Meanwhile, and the second reason was because when I played that full ride line, sometimes I didn't have enough restanders to call. I had 1 restander in my hand, but no second restander, so I couldn't go for 5 attacks. But with Ascendance Assault in the ride deck, you can. For those of you who don't know what he does, when he's rode upon, you can reveal a Flagburg Dragon or an Inroad Shooter from your hand to call him to rearguard circle, or you can Soul Blast a card other than himself from Soul in order to call him to rearguard circle. You hardly ever do that second part, but just in case, that's why we play the extra soul in order to use it, so we can still have 1 more soul for something like Inlet Pulse or Aggress Blue. So I think Ascendance Assault in the ride deck is still correct. I even think Ascendance Assault in the order Flagburg list is still correct, because sometimes you really do need that extra restander in the early game, in the mid game. And next up, obviously the main man himself is Flagship Dragon, Flagburg Dragon. His ability is that when he attacks a Vanguard, you counterblast 1 and perform all the following below according to the number of attacks you've done this turn. So if it's 3 or more, you draw a card. If it's 4 or more, you choose 2 of your opponent's rearguards and retire them. And if it's 5 or more, and that includes his own attack, he gets 10,000 power, and during the battle that he attacked, your opponent must guard with 3 or more cards from their hand at the same time. So it's really, really good for applying constant pressure to your opponent. But honestly, some of the best parts about this skill are the first and second part, where you just plus your hand while also minusing your opponent's field. So against certain matchups that don't like retire, like Bastion, Prison, overdress especially, those can really mess those decks up. It's just a really good boss unit. So we obviously play as many restanders as we can as possible in order to try and maximize the amount of usage for the deck. And obviously the whole deck revolves around him. That's it for the ride deck. We had a bit more to talk about with the ride deck because it's just, there's a lot of avenues you can go with Flagburg now. It's not just set 4 or set 3, and it's like that's basically the only thing we can do. Now we have a lot more options, and we might have more options in the future. Who knows? Now we go to the main deck, which is 3 Persona Ride. I don't think I need to tell you all why Persona Ride is good. If you ride a card from your hand on a copy, you get 10,000 power for the turn. You can draw 1. It's amazing, especially in this deck because you have restanders, so you can completely maximize the amount of power that you can get with Persona Ride in this deck. So no question here, unless you're playing a grade 4 deck, you always want to play Persona Ride. Next up, for the final grade 3 we played in the deck, we played the best card in the deck, which is Inlet Pulse Dragon. This card says at the end of the battle that it attacked a grade 3 or greater Vanguard. If your Vanguard is Flagship Dragon, Flagburg Dragon, and it's the first battle of the turn, you can Soul Blast 1 and stand him. And then, at the end of the turn, if the total number of attacks you've done is 4 or more, you can put him into Soul, draw 1 card. So this is like our main way of gathering resources, gathering hand. It's a very free restander. It's the card that you always want to mulligan for when you're going second, because even more than Persona Ride, because you really want to see this guy in your hand. He's just the best card in the deck. The deck would not be the same without him. I can't imagine the deck ever being played without him. However, I do understand that it can be expensive. He's about, I think, $12 right now, last I checked. So if you cannot afford Inlet Pulse Dragon, I recommend something along the lines of High Rate Burst Dragon, which isn't as good, but he's still pretty decent, which is when he's placed on Rearguard Circle, you choose one of your other rearguards, and it gets a ability where it's on the first battle of the turn, you counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, and restand him. So it helps you just get that extra restander. If you're missing the Flagburg, if you're missing the Inlet Pulse, sorry, that is what I recommend for you in this deck, because I do understand they can be a little expensive, especially for a deck that isn't 100% like meta. It's still a very good meta contender, but it's not meta. So I understand if you can't afford him. However, if you do have the money to afford him, I highly recommend it. He's the best card in the deck. That's it for the grade 3s. Moving on to the grade 2s. We play 3 more copies of Ascendance Assault and 4 copies of our Aggress Blue. These are the only other grade 2s we play in the deck. That's because they're both our other restanders. So besides Inlet Pulse, these are our other restanders we play in the deck. Ascendance Assault says when he's his rearguard skill says when your other rearguard attacks your opponent's Vanguard, you counterblast 1 if your Vanguard's Flagship Dragon, Flagburg Dragon, and you stand him. So he's really good, just constantly apply pressure, especially on Persona Ride turn, because then you can swing with something like Inlet Pulse for 23, use the skill restand, swing for 20 with him, swing with him for 23, use his skill, swing, stand him again. Then if you have a booster behind him, swing for 28, which is a magic number. And then afterwards, you finally swing with Flagburg. So he's really good. That's why we play him with 3 other copies. We need to see him at pretty much at all times. He's probably one of the best restanders. He is a little CB heavy along with Flagburg. So that's why we want to try and maximize on some counterchargers. But other than that, I couldn't imagine the deck without him. And then finally, for the last restander we still play 4 copies of Aggress Blue Dragon. His skill says at the end of the battle that this unit attacked a rearguard. So he needs to attack a rearguard. If your Vanguard's Flagburg, you Soul Blast 1 and you stand him. So this is really good in some instances. If your opponent like filled up most of their board. If they have 3 rearguards and you swing at this, you can swing at one of the rearguards. They're probably not going to guard it, because even if they do, they're wasting a card in their hands, since you can just kill it with Flagburg anyways. And then you can just use the skill to stand him and continue your attacks. Along with Inlet Pulse, they can be a bit soul heavy. So again, that's why we play the Rorowa ride line. But overall, these are your 2 restanders that you always want to use when you're going first because your opponent's not going to be on grade 3 when you're going first, so you can't use Inlet Pulse's restand. These are the two that you want to pretty much always find. And they're still really good to this day. I couldn't imagine these guys getting taken out unless we get a better restand that can be used early. That's it for the grade 2s of the deck. Now moving on to the grade 1s. We play 4 PGs. Pretty obvious, you need to play the PGs, especially since we don't have any other PGs, so not much to talk about here. It's overdress, you play PGs. Next up, we play the best resource generator in the deck, which is Prize Trident. His skill says, when your other unit attacks, if it's the 5th battle of the turn or more, you push him into soul to countercharge 1. So that is very simple. He helps you generate resources. He can be used before Flagburg's skill. So if you don't have any open CB, like say you only have one CB, and you swing with Flagburg, and you have this in your field, before you use Flagburg's skill, you can use his skill, push him into the soul, countercharge 1, then use Flagburg's skill to counterblast 1 and do your series of skills. So he's the main way you can kind of keep your damage a little bit lower if you want, in order to try and survive your opponent's onslaught. He's just really good. You always need to play him unless we get a better resource generator in the future, which I imagine we will, but he's the best guy for the job right now. So Prize Trident, it's definitely a 4 of. Now for the little bit of spicy tech. We play 3 copies of Stepping Calyx Salvia. Salvia is a grade 1 with the following ability. When this unit is placed in Rearguard Circle, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you call a plant token to Rearguard. So, why are we playing this card? Because she helps in prison matchups, especially. Well, pretty much she's only there for prison matchups. Because if you put her into prison, save her for later, and then you Soul Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, you call something from prison. If you Soul Blast 1 to call this, you can use her skill to call a plant token. You're effectively Soul Blasting 1 to call 2 units. And yeah, while one of those units is just a 5k with no ability, it is still a unit. You can put it behind Flagburg, make Flagburg a 28 on attack. You can put her behind her to have a 13k or 23k column. It's just really good. And also, if you're just missing some boosters, there are some times where you want to have an 18k attack Inlet Pulse, while also having a 18k attack on your Ascendance Assault. You can just play this in order to keep giving yourself attackers. So it's more of like a tech slot now. I can imagine why some people wouldn't like her in the list. I really like her in the list. I think she's fantastic against the prison matchup. So she's just really good. Another thing is that she helps you also get to that 2 plant token strat, where if you have 2 plant tokens and your opponent pure lights you, you can just put away 2 plant tokens. They don't go to prison. Instead, they just go to the back to the token zone. So they effectively lose 5k power on their pure light turn, which can mean victory or defeat. That could be the difference. So 3 Salvia, I think, is probably correct. I could imagine probably cutting down on it in the future. Just depends on what set 7 brings to Flagburg. Now, finally, we play 2 more copies of Inroad Shooter. Inroad Shooter, for those who don't know what he does, he's the grade 1 of the ride line, although we don't utilize him for his grade 1 ability, which just basically when Ascendance Assault rides on him, you can call him to Rearguard Circle. We use him for 2 reasons. The first one is his Rearguard ability, where if your Vanguard is Flagship Dragon, Flagburg Dragon, or Ascendance Assault, either the grade 3 or the grade 2, he gets plus 2k power and intercept. So he basically becomes a grade 2 at all times. So you can actually use them for like counter rushing. Like if your opponent's trying to rush you, you can try and rush them back. Especially since this is going to be a 10k and your Vanguard's going to be a 15k with the boost from the plant token. So that can become really good for helping pressure your opponent. It also can be a 10k booster for something like Ascendance Assault if you're going first, because then you can swing for 20 on your opponent's 10k, hit over defensive triggers, or you can put it as a booster for your Inlet Pulse, making you a 23. That can be really nice. I think he's still pretty good for the deck. Maybe I could see not playing him, or I could see him maybe even playing him back in the ride deck. It depends on what stuff we get later on, and how the meta is shaping up. Because I definitely think set 6 and 7 are going to shake up the meta. And now that's it. And the final grade 1, It's an order card, which y'all probably have seen it before. That's 3 copies of Spiritual Body Condensation. Back in my old list, I used to not play this for the reason that I didn't have a lot of soul. So there were times where the main card you want to call off this is your Inlet Pulse Dragon to keep reusing its powerful restand ability and its resource generation and draw power. But sometimes in the old list, I would have only 1 soul, meaning that if I use Spiritual Body, I'd have to get rid of that soul to call Inlet Pulse, but then Inlet Pulse wouldn't be able to use the skill. So that was just kind of a rough point. But now that we're playing the Rorowa ride line and we can afford having extra soul, I play a lot more of this just to try and maximize myself while getting Inlet Pulses or whatever we need. You can even get Ascendance Assault back to your field. You can get prized Trident if you're missing a little bit of resource generation, missing countercharge. Just Spiritual Body is so good. It's probably the best order card in the game. Like, for obvious reasons, it's basically just Monster Reborn. So yes, I think Spiritual Body is pretty much correct for Flagburg. I think that was the one thing I was kind of wrong about in my old list. But hey, I'm playing it now. We always learn our mistakes. So that's it for the grade 1s. Now moving on to triggers for the last thing. We play 7 crit. That's one thing I think I should probably change. Because, spoiler alert, we're playing 4 draws as well. I'm thinking I should probably bump down the draws to 3 and playing 8 crit. Because with 8 crit, you want to try and kill your opponent. Along with the overtrigger, that's effectively 9 crits in your deck. And I think Flagburg already has enough draw power to where this isn't necessary. Especially against Prison, which in this build can sometimes be a grind game. The draw triggers can really mess you up in certain points. So I definitely think bumping down the draw triggers is probably better. I'll have to do more testing before I definitively make that my new build. So I'll let you know if that works out for me in the future. And finally, for heal triggers, I was debating about playing the Restander heal or the heal that gets 15k if your opponent has an additional crit. But I think if you don't know what your meta is going to be playing or what's in the meta, you should probably just play the 15k heals, since they're going to be 15ks no matter what your opponent does. While the other ones, if you're facing the wrong deck, they're just going to be 10k shield, which can lose you a game sometimes. So if you know what your local meta or even your big meta is playing, like BRO and stuff, you can probably deduce what kind of heals you want to play. But as for me, I personally just really like playing the vanilla heals as they're consistent no matter what. And next, finally, y'all know what it is. It's the overtrigger. We're playing the Stoikea one because the Cray Elemental one is completely useless to us. Doesn't do anything. Flagburg is normally your final attack. So you want to be able to have the additional draw, the additional crit. The heal sometimes can be really big. And obviously the 100 million is pretty good. It's the overtrigger. We don't have to talk anymore about that. We all know. We all know it. We all hate it. But we got to play it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Flagburg Dragon deck list. Thank you all so much for watching it. I'll have a lot more deck profiles in the future later. Again, sorry, I've been gone for so long. It's just summer classes. I just recently went to Clash of Nations at Infinity Cards, Houston. They're a great community. I love the shop owners there. A super fun tournament. We just recently played in Clash of Nations Dragon Empire. We have one more Clash of Nations in a couple months, and that is Brantgate. So if y'all are in the local area and can make it, I would love to see y'all there. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you can leave a like on the video, maybe leave a comment if you really feel like it. I really appreciate it. Thank y'all so much, and bye.